So maybe you're thinking about starting a YouTube channel and you're sort of confused about what equipment you would need. Now you'd be surprised that you can make really good content quite inexpensively, really. Inexpensively, is that a word? You don't have to spend a lot of money, to put it that way. Or you can spend a lot of money. It just depends what your budget is. But I think before you decide what equipment you need to consider what type of content you're going to create. Now, I can't help you with that. But as I chat through the sort of my recommendations, it should give you an idea of what equipment that you should go out and spend all your money on. So considerations then, I'm going to put a little list up on the screen as I go along, and then you can kind of tick off or cross off the things that are important to you. But there are some things that are really important and that you must have. So let's start off with this camera then. So there's loads of cameras you can buy, and I couldn't even begin to go through the list of cameras, but I can go through the list of options, and that's what's most important. So the first thing I think you need is you need to be able to monitor yourself when you are filming. So in other words, you need to be able to see you on a monitor so you can check the exposure, check the focusing, check the framing. There's nothing worse than if you're cutting the top of your head off, or you're badly exposed, or you're not in focus, which is even worse. So you need a little monitor. Now this camera here has a little sort of a flip up monitor that does that type of thing. Which is really cool, isn't it? So if I was filming a piece to camera, I could do this and I would be able to monitor myself in this little screen. So that is really important. Now some cameras, this one has a flip up screen, some have one that flips out to the side. They're all different, but I would say this isn't the best flip up idea, to be honest. But I do like Sony cameras, and that's why I've got this one. But there's plenty that have a flip out screen that will flip out at the side. So that's one of the first things, and I think you can't skimp on that really. You need to be able to monitor yourself. So that's the first consideration. Now the next one is going to be autofocus, because you need to be able to point the camera at yourself, obviously, to get yourself into focus. But then if you turn it around to your surroundings, it needs to find focus straight away, and then obviously back to yourself. Now, a lot of cameras have got face detection. Now that works really well too. So it will always track your face or a face in the scene. So, but above all else, you definitely need, I've just switched this camera on by mistake. Above all else, you need that autofocus. And again, some cameras are better than others at autofocus. And I think generally they're all getting really good now. Yeah, Sony I shoot with, fine. I think Canon leads the way with their dual pixel technology autofocus. But don't let that put you off. They all do a pretty reasonable job. So that's the second one you need. The third one is often overlooked, and that's audio. Now, whatever camera you buy, I'm sure will have some way of recording audio. However, they don't generally record audio very well or to a professional standard, and having good audio in your videos, believe it or not, is actually more important than the visual. Now, visual's obviously really important, but somebody could actually watch something creaking in the background. Somebody could actually watch your video, and as long as they can hear perfectly what you're saying, it doesn't matter so much if it's not exposed 100%. I often watch something on the news, I don't know, satellite link from somewhere else, some far-flung place, and it's really poorly exposed because they haven't got the equipment to get the exposure right. But what is always perfect is the audio, and that's key, I think. So there's many different microphones you can buy. Anyway, the third consideration is audio, and you need to buy a camera that has an audio input socket. That will allow you to attach an external microphone. Now, as I've said before, there's plenty of external microphones out there, and relatively inexpensive or relatively expensive. Just depends what your budget is. But for around about £50, $50, you would get a really useful and quite decent external microphone, and it will improve the quality of your videos immensely. So that's that consideration. As you can see on this camera, it has a radio receiver. Now, this is really clever. Now, I've lost, oh, here it is. So in this little bag here, I have the transmitter, and I can plug a microphone into this, put this in my pocket, and put a lapel mic up here, and there you go. This will fire the audio signal across to the receiver. And that's really clever, isn't it? If I ever go out and I forget my lapel mic, this transmitter actually has a little microphone built in. So I could just clip this. I could just do this, look. I could just clip that. I can never get this right. I could clip that to there, and that now be recording my audio, or I can hide it, as I say, with a lapel mic or whatever. But that's great. Just consider though that that's great if you're filming yourself, that's going to pick your audio up. But if you are filming your surroundings or other people, you perhaps need a microphone attached. But again, it's all down, said again twice then, it's all down to what type of videos that you are going to produce, and only you'll know which microphone suits you better. You could actually film with a smartphone. Now, this is an iPhone 11 Pro, so you could actually use one of these guys, and believe it or not, with this little contraption, I can plug into that, and when I do, I can attach an external microphone. So I think the quality of a picture, video that comes from an iPhone is fantastic. As long as you couple it together with decent audio, then if you don't do that, but then as you know, as I've said many times now, the audio is not that good. So getting just that little connection there would allow me to even attach this radio mic system, and I often do that, and that's a great option. So one of the downsides of using a mobile phone, however, is that you don't get this. You don't get the option to switch out lenses, and there's a lot you can achieve with. Now, again, it's all about your budget, isn't it? This lens was fairly expensive. This is a wide angle lens, and I think it was around about £500 just for the lens. But what that gives me is beautiful depth of field, and you can probably see whatever's behind me at this desk is probably blurred, and that is called bokeh, and it's just that lovely blurry background. It separates me from the background and creates like a filmic look. Now, you can't really get that, in my opinion anyway, with a mobile phone, but do you really need it? So again, your consideration, you have to consider whether that's important for you. Lighting is a big thing. Now, you may always be filming outdoors, and lighting then becomes less of an issue. It's still important, but if you use natural light's great. So if you're always doing outdoor videos, then perhaps you don't need lighting. Now, if you're going to do what I'm doing now, which is doing a piece to camera, then you will need a light. Now, I'm using a really big overhead light here with a massive softbox, and it's not the most expensive thing, because it's a cheaper version of a very expensive make. But that is producing this lovely soft light that's hitting my face. So that's something for you to consider. Now, you can spend a lot of money and get a lovely Aputure 120D Mark II, which are fantastic lights. Or you could go for this Godox light, which is much, much, much cheaper. However, it's a bit noisy, so there's a bit of a trade-off there. Going back to audio as well, because I'm just talking a little bit about my setup. I've got an overhead mic, which is just here, so that is what's picking my audio up. So I don't have any lapel mics or anything like that, or microphones on show. So if you're going to be doing stuff based in a studio, that's what you're going to need. The big overhead light, lovely softbox on it, maybe an overhead mic. So again, that could be something for you to consider. Right, the next thing is, because I know you guys love this, is slow motion. This iPhone does amazing slow motion. This camera does slow motion, But if slow motion is really important to you, you've got to consider that 100 frames a second, 120 frames a second, it's more likely that you'll be shooting in 1080p. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, 1080p is HD video. There's nothing wrong with 1080, but obviously everything is leaning towards 4K. So it's very unlikely that you're going to get high frame rates to give you 4K slow motion. So what do I mean by high frame rates? Our TVs are 25 frames a second. When we watch something on a TV, 25 frames a second. If I film at 50 frames a second, it means it's recorded a lot more frames, which means I can then slow it down. And then that's how I get me slow motion. So obviously 100 frames a second will give me really super slow motion, and anything above that, 180 frames a second, it's going to be super slow motion. Now, to do that, cameras will struggle to sort of do that at 4K. Now, obviously there are cameras out there that do that, but then what is your budget? Because they're going to cost you a hell of a lot of money. So slow motion could be the thing for you. Only you can decide that. So the other thing would be image stabilization. Now, this camera has no image stabilization whatsoever. Okay. And there are cameras out there that have fantastic image stabilization built in, like the Panasonic cameras. This one doesn't. However, I have got a gimbal for this, a motorized gimbal, and I put this camera onto the motorized gimbal, and that gives me super floaty super floaty footage that hasn't got any camera shake in it. And gimbals now are becoming really inexpensive. I mean, the other thing to do would be to just get a tripod. And I love this little tripod. And I can, if I was in a cafe or a bar and I was doing a piece to camera, I can just quite simply do that. It'd be up a bit higher than that, but just for the speed, I'll leave it where it is. And I can just flip that screen up. I've got my radio mic on there and I can do my piece to camera. So you find that you could actually walk around with this and just pop it down wherever you wanted to film. And that is a pretty good option to do, and what a lot of YouTube content creators use is just a simple tripod. I can do the same thing with my iPhone. I can pop my iPhone into this little rig here, just screw it down, and then that has already got a little mount on it, which will then go into here, and I've got the same thing. So there you go, I've got the same thing, and if I plug that little radio mic into this mobile phone, I've got the same sort of situation, but in a much smaller form factor. Because that could be another consideration for you, which is the actual physical size of your, the equipment that you're taking with you. So that could be another thing. What a lot of content creators do and filmmakers do is to get super sort of stabilized footage. This is where you can start filming in slow motion again. So if you film at a fast frame rate, then the little jerky movements you make when you are filming are kind of ironed out, because you're slowing the footage down and that little movement suddenly becomes a lot slower and you don't notice it as much. And the other little tip about doing slow motion footage is if you use a wide angle lens. This is a wide angle lens, and if it's not zoomed into your subject and it's quite wide, then again, that will sort of help you get that steady footage. So that's another little tip for you. Picture profiles could be important to you. You might want to get that cinematic look. Now, currently I'm filming in log profile, and that would, it's got a high dynamic range. Now, I don't want to speak too technical if you're just starting off, but it allows you to sort of grade your footage and get it to look more cinematic. So that could be your thing. So you could be going for a camera that's got log, a log profile in it. So that could be important. Lastly then is all the little bits, extra bits, and they would be stuff like a camera cage. This one's got a half cage on it, and there's loads of camera cages out there. This half cage works brilliant for me because it gives me a bit of extra grip and also allows me to attach things to the side. Now I've got a bigger cage for this, and the camera I'm using now to film on has got quite a large cage on it, and that allows me to put a handle on it or two wooden handles, an external monitor, etc. So again, it's up to you, what sort of accessories you think you need. Also, you can obviously get a cage for your mobile phone as well, so you can do that. I've also got this, which is the Osmo Mobile. So if I'm not going to do it now, but if I put this into there, then that gives me super smooth, stabilized footage. Now, I can get quite good stabilized footage from the phone without this, but I kind of like the way it will always keep, as I'm walking around, it will always keep the phone, horizontal, because if you're handheld, and you might have a tendency to sort of turn it around. So this will keep it sort of, in a horizontal plane, which is what you want. So that's just the start, isn't it? That's just the start. That's giving you things to think about. And as I say, hopefully there's there will be, because I'll make sure there's a little list there of those considerations. And that's what you need to do. You need to decide what type of content you're going to create, and that will then give you an idea of what equipment that you need to buy. And obviously, knowing what you're looking for together with the amount of money you've got to spend equals the equipment that you buy. And you can always add to it. I've got the A7 Mark III filming me at the moment, and I added to it with this. So I could have two cameras. I obviously haven't at the moment because I'm holding it, but I'd have two cameras. I added lights. I've got a blue light behind me. So as you go along, you get more and more equipment. So if you've liked what you've seen, subscribe and pop back, because I'm going to do loads of sort of video and camera reviews, and this is just the start of something big. So thanks for watching.